Eagle 6 in the track.
Roger.
Over 1 bombs away. One's going to climb high above 20. You're south.
Eagle 6 radar contact. Eagle 6 is visual.
And it goes left.
Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Prickly Hedgehog, and we've got another video on DCS World Projects for the DCS SITREP this week that I think you're going to be interested to hear about. We'll start, of course, with a recent video from Mover and Gonki. I know I've covered some of the topics in here already. It featured Wombat and none other than Wags from Eagle Dynamics. So it was a 2-hour event and covered a large number of real-world topics, which meshed and gelled well with DCS topics too, because so much of DCS brings in material from the real world. So let's dive into a couple of these with a little bit more depth and how they pertain to DCS world as it evolves down the track here. So one of the things that was really interesting and came up really is AI and machine learning and how it's going to be implemented in the future for DCS world's AI. And Wags confirmed that it's just not quite there yet, but it may be something introduced in the future. He talked about the changes that ED made to BFM and BVR for the AI, which were based on variable studies that they had done to improve the prior iteration of the AI's predictability and general behavior. Wags admitted it really wasn't all that good, and I think a lot of you will probably testify to that in terms of the way it would behave into a 2-circle fight, etc., in BFM. So he said that to better improve the AI, single ship AI is going to need to be set in stone before they could introduce more complex programming for multiple AI assets in, say, for example, BVR environments. Now, the caveat of all of that was it's a tactical exploration, which runs the risk of giving away potentially tactical secrets, which could be used by potential adversaries as an op-4 trainer. Not something that ED wants to get involved with, and WAG said they'd like to steer clear of anything like that, and they would only use publicly available information.
Watch, stand by, 2 knots in sight. Wait for you, copy.
Wait for it, copy.
Now that came up as a topic quite a bit about what ED could use in terms of information. And I know that there is some confusion about what that actually means. For some people, anything that's on the internet must mean it's publicly available and public information. And of course, that is not true. There are plenty of people out there doing things that they shouldn't be by gaining classified information or information that hasn't been cleared as declassified and throwing it up on, the dark web or some other place where it can be accessed publicly, but it doesn't technically mean it's public information. It has to be cleared, it has to be declassified, it has to be approved to be usable by the general public for purposes like this. And he did mention the fact that part of the delay for the F-15E was essentially the government making sure, because it's an active aircraft, did not breach any of these publicly available information caveats. So it's a complex topic, one that's very interesting, and certainly is one that inhibits ED's ability to do certain aircraft. And there's 2 components to this. One, you get the hidden information, if you like, or the inaccessibility of information, even if you can find it. It has to, again, be publicly released. And the other problem, too, is that not all aircraft, Wags pointed out, are actually viable as a sellable product. So just because they'd like to make it, they also have to consider there's no point building an aircraft that isn't going to be popular enough to sell. So there's a lot of different things going on there, a lot of competing interests. But I think that was a really, really good point, and I see that confusion come up a lot. So people say, I found this manual. Yep, cool, but it's not necessarily something that ED can use just because you found it or whatever data is available. It may actually still be classified. So again, an ongoing topic, and one that I'm sure will continue to befuddle some members of the community. Now, Wags also crushed a few butterflies last week, and I did make a little fun video, not poking fun at Wags or anyone in particular, but he did say that DCS World, in the end, it's a game. It's a flight sim game, as the caveat he added there too. So most of you did take this with the humor it was intended. Some people, got a little upset and wanted to argue the point. But the reality is, yeah, it's a flight sim game. It's a very, very good one. And I think it's important to remember, I've talked to real pilots about this, and they kind of chuckle when people say, oh, it's a simulator, it's really realistic, which it is. But there's a lot of stuff missing from that experience of actual flight. And that should be obvious. But the other flip side is that we do have a tremendous number of real-world pilots, military and civilian, commercial airline pilots, etc., who enjoy flying DCS and are very impressed with what it can do. So that's a really good endorsement, and I think that's just something to kind of keep in perspective without getting too uptight or getting your knickers in a bunch about whether or not it's a game or whether or not it's a sim.
Like I just said, there is a double click or a zipper click, as it's also called. That's just a way of acknowledging somebody without saying anything. So, you're limiting your emissions, but they still know that you heard them.
All right, Supercarrier stuff. This was really interesting. So WAG said that they are going to add plane directors as part of the next iteration of development for the Supercarrier. This has been brought up before, along with the ready room, which isn't quite ready yet, unfortunately. I know this is a topic of frustration for people, but the plane directors I'm really excited to see injected in the game. They will be there from basically the startup, where the aircraft is chained down, and you'll get your startup queues, and then you'll be passed off to the various plane directors before being hooked up to the CAT and launched. So again, another little immersion thing, which I think is cool. Also, this will include when you are trapped and landed, and you'll be directed out of the landing box and off to the parking area. So you're going to be handed off to person after person after person until you reach your final destination, which I think is really cool. Now, it represents, I think, a pretty significant amount of work, and I'm curious to see how this works in action with AI aircraft, AI deck crew, or even groups of human players on a shared server, and whether or not those AI are going to look realistic without getting kind of cluttering aircraft or crashing into each other, etc., etc. So if they achieve this, I think it's going to be a very, very cool addition to the game. And again, the Supercarrier is the best rendition I can think of any aircraft carrier sim experience and a combat flight sim. I'm also hoping to see at some point more of those carrier-based planes that we're lacking in the game right now, such as the A7 Crusader and the A6. Those are being produced by 3 different third-party developers, which we've discussed in the past, including Heat Blur, Magnitude 3, and Flying Iron simulations. So we've got some big hitters producing excellent aircraft, and I'm excited to see how all these things come together with that AI experience. I think it's really, really cool. Also, ED are looking for someone, said Wags, with sufficient gravitas to be the voice of the air boss on the carrier. So get your resumes in now, or your audition tapes at least, and polished up so that you can let Wags know that you want a shot at the title and have your name immortalized in the game. So maybe there's some air bosses out there who are willing to do it. That would be pretty cool. Of course, we have Jello as an LSO from the Fighter Pilot podcast, and so it's cool to have these real pilots providing not only voiceover work but also input onto the development of this game and what these things should sound like, what these things should look like, etc., etc. And I think, again, that's really cool. Continuing on to the carrier stuff, then once that is done, they'll also be working on ground crew for Air Force and ground-based aircraft. And this is definitely something that's lacking. We need that to embellish the ground launch experience. It's a little bit sterile right now. I know the other thing I'd love to see, Juice and I have discussed this at the Air Warfare group, where we wanted to see hydraulic fluid stains on parking spots, just to dirty up the airfields a little bit, make them a little bit more realistic, less sterile looking, You see bits and pieces of it here and there with the chocks on the ground, things like that. But I'd love to see a little bit more of the fluid stains, etc. Again, just to bring some realism. This environment is pretty clean in a lot of the airports and things and the air bases. So again, another little embellishment there. Again, I'm looking forward to seeing that in the game. The ground crew stuff is really, really neat. Plus, we're also looking, hopefully, for more equipment assets, just to, again, enhance the ground crew. Some of the equipment available, if you're trying to create missions and things, is not necessarily authentic to the era or authentic to that particular region. Say, for example, Russian equipment that might pop up in an American airfield just to substitute the particular piece that we're looking for. Some people won't even notice the difference, but I think that would be cool to see more of that. And I know that Juice has done a video on that in the past on things we'd love to see, embellishing those parking spots and those ground assets for the game. Frivolous stuff, I know, but it's all just sort of eye candy stuff that just adds to that immersion and realism.
Okay, go ahead, Golfer. Go ahead for Golfer.
625 extends pretty far north. You might be able to shift it north to stay out of the weather.
And Roger, we'll coordinate. Thank you. And now Center Golf 17 request.
Now, Wax was interesting here too. He did reveal he does like quite a lot of other games, and like me, he actually admitted he enjoys Mass Effect, the first 3 iterations. I think Mass Effect 2 personally was my favorite, and he does play, therefore, games outside of DCS World. He's also waiting for Starfield from Bethesda. This is definitely on my things to do next month. I'm really looking forward to it. It's definitely going to take me away from DCS for a while. I got the early access, so we're not far away from that. I'm really looking forward to what is going to be an amazing space exploration extravaganza from Bethesda, so can't wait for that. So if I'm quiet for a while, it could be because I'm playing Starfield. All right, moving on, Wags also confirmed that ED, here we go, this is the biggie, the news that a lot of you have been waiting for forever to be officially confirmed, but they are planning to build a Korean and Vietnam theater for new maps in the game. And when asked by Mover if this was going to happen, Wags confirmed absolutely. And he also added, though, they're not in work right now. I want to stress that they're not in work right now. They will come at some stage. So the takeaway, yeah, should be obvious. We're not going to see these in the game anytime soon, unfortunately, because ED hasn't even started them. The Vietnam map will also present, I think, some very interesting challenges in terms of vegetation, saturation, and destructible environments for players to interact with. And then there's the assets players will be looking for these regions as well, similar to what we talked about with, almost inconsequential assets around airfields. We're going to need some assets to embellish these environments, trucks, Jeeps, tanks, whatever else it is that embellish those environments, those assets between the two different adversaries, if you like, just to enhance that experience. So there's a lot to do yet. We're a long way out. Stay tuned, basically, is the short answer.
Number 64, Roger. You're cleared to conduct area refueling along AR 625 track. Maintain flight level 230 until you cleared higher by the tanker. Number 64.
These regional maps that are being produced, they're going to stick around for a while. They're still going to be, I think, the bread and butter for Eagle Dynamics, especially for people running servers, single mission campaigns or single player campaigns. And ED, though, did admit that they are working on a world map. That technology has been in play for the last couple of years. The challenge is in creating destructive environments. So the physical world, traffic, and weather hasn't been considered at this juncture. So hard to know what all that means, how much of a tangible product that means. Sounds like, it's a wee way off. And of course, he also brought up the fact that they are still working on a dynamic campaign and some of the considerations for that, which is pretty involved in terms of a military industrial complex. I know people always say, well, 15, 20 years ago, Falcon 4 did it. It's a good point. I'm not sure why it's taking quite so long. That's probably a discussion for a separate video, but we don't really know where they're at with it. That's something that's been in play and in development for a long, long time. And of course, the game is changing. I think one of the big ones really for ED to be able to do that successfully, and it's something I've discussed in the past, and that is the fact that under the original game engine, I don't think it would have supported all of that traffic. A dynamic campaign simply wouldn't run on our modern hardware because it wasn't taking advantage of multi-threading. Well, now multi-threading is coming, so this makes that a little bit more plausible. So yeah, all guesstimation really as to where they're at with it, and we'll have to wait and see, unfortunately. Now, a cool thing here, Wags also mentioned that cargo is going to be able to be launched out of the back of the C-130. That's a third-party module, remember, and it's still in development. We saw it in the 2023 and beyond video. We don't have really, I haven't looked to see where they're up to with it and if there's any other news, so I'll have to come back to that topic as well. It's one that I missed last week on the third-party developers, and I apologize. It was already a long enough video, and it probably deserves, like a couple of other developers, a separate video. Wags was going to ask them, or ask the team, whether or not we can do paratroopers out the back, because that came up from, I think it was Mover who maybe mentioned that, but so that would be pretty cool. The cargo component generally, though, is very cool, and that, no doubt, will also be put into the Chinook, which they're also working on right now, where logistics in the game has a growing niche of support. Wags said the Chinook was, taking up some of his time right now. We'll come back to helicopters in a second, which I think are a really growing niche in this game and provide some really interesting challenges and flying opportunities, which is really cool to see. So while we're still on the subject of maps, a couple of new things you will have noticed a few weeks back that we saw some teaser shots from Orbix showcasing aspects of the Kola Peninsula. I've had the good fortune to have early access to that map. It's still very much in development. Time constraints haven't allowed me much time to play with it. As I said, the map is definitely still a work in progress. I'm not really authorized to provide any information per the NDA. And I hope you enjoyed, therefore, the early pics that we've seen, because many of you have asked me about where the map is at. Is it still being developed, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely, you can see it's coming along quite nicely from these pictures, which I hope you enjoy. So the takeaway again here is that this is shaping up to be a neat map. There are planned campaigns from Reflected and Baltic Dragon for this. So those will be down the line with the map. Those are still being worked on. I think it's going to be a real treat to embellish our maps, and stay tuned, therefore, for more information.
Delta 7, go ahead.
Roger, sir. Is there any way we can extend the track to the north? Waypoint of north 3745, west 117.24.
All right, I mentioned helicopters. The Mi-8 in last week's big open beta patch saw the injection of an overhaul for it, and it now features multi-crew capacity. As I said before, helicopters have become quite a popular and subsidiary flight experience in DCS, and I suspect this development could be some work ED is doing as part of work with the Chinook, that is the multi-crew for a large helicopter like this. Now, Wax has indicated he, as I said before, has been busy with that module of late, so we'll see if we get some more information on that Chinook coming up. But back to the Mi-8, according to the blurb from ED, the eagerly awaited multi-crew functionality and the corresponding changes for voice chat and cargo ops support has now been implemented and is available with the most recent open beta update. There are 4 crew positions which are available, including the cockpit crew and the side gunner. They have added new functionality to the multi-crew to join requests, permitting the crew commander to see the various role requests. Now, this aircraft has specific AI crew functionality for the mechanic technician, which is the center cockpit seat, such as the on-demand monitoring of the yaw autopilot channel. If a human player takes this role, then the AI functionality ceases to work automatically and switches over to the specific player to manage. While working with cargo, the mechanic technician has moved to the rear cabin for cargo ops observation and management. I haven't tested this functionality yet, but it is exciting to see the expansion of multi-crew operation in aircraft like this, which, as I said, or hinted at least before, has me in no doubt that it will translate into other logistical aircraft. which, as I said, have a growing fan base. Again, we're talking the C-130 here, we're talking the Chinook, and who knows what else is in development, or what other helicopters this could transition into. So ED also let us know that they're close to injecting the new pilot bodies for the Mi-24P Hind, which is also seeing some updates. They're describing this as a sophisticated process which is built in stages as follows. Stage 1 is the pilot figure modeling. So the basic articulated human body is selected and the desired clothing, style, and fabric is laid over it. The analysis of original flight suits, parachutes, and crew equipment, along with photographs and videos, is then collated. Additional talks with pilots and SMEs are made to iron out any fine nuances. Facial modeling to a suitable character is developed with the skin and detailed texturing to follow. Stage 2, placing the pilot model in the cockpit and the animations. So in-cockpit animations are selected with a view to delivering natural man-machine interface as well as realistic body, head, and eye movement. More specific animations such as leaning into the aiming sight and interacting with the cockpit control panels are determined and fine-tuned for realism. Finally, each crew member is given an animation for simulated incapacitation. Ooh. So I haven't seen that yet too. I presume somebody could get shot or injured in some way, puts them out of action. Cool. Now, from the VR point of view, the goal is to deliver realism and immersion and make you feel as though it is your own body. Now, that will be something that needs to be verified by the VR users among you, as I know VR experiences are varied or mixed in general, with the game depending on computer specs, or at least the results depending on computer specs and the various rigs out there, and not all of which appear to interface consistently with the game. There's a lot of, like I said, gnashing of teeth depending on the individual player. Some people have no drama, other people are like, this doesn't work, or it's not working as well as it should do, blah, 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 blah. So that's not necessarily ED's fault, but VR, I think, for me and my experiences, I'd love to test it out. I'd love to explore VR, but I'm a little bit hesitant because I feel it's not quite there yet. And the other problem is there's so many different headsets out there, and the software to interact with the game is not always there. So yeah, it's a little bit of a technology that I'm a little wary of just yet. Nonetheless, this kind of thing is a positive concept for the challenge of creating immersion in a detailed simulation like this game offers. So we'll see how that evolves. Lastly here, kind of rounding out the news from this last week, ED announced a new campaign for the Hind. It's known as the Border Campaign. It's selling in the e-store right now, and it's set in the Caucasus map, which, by way of reference, is a free map if you haven't figured that out yet, but you will need to buy the Hind. So cool, another little addition to, as I said before, the growing niche in helicopters.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Golf 17.
Now there's more maps coming, more updates and things like that, so I will bring you some more news on map updates. I think we need to revisit Syria, which has been updated, along with the South Atlantic as well, and also revisit the Sinai map, which is another little favorite there. South Atlantic, Sinai, Syria, great maps, definitely ones I recommend. And I'm working on another history script brief on events for the things that occurred in the Sinai over the years. So stay tuned for that as time allows. It's a slow work in progress as I'm doing my research and pulling the script together. I think that'll do. Thanks for tuning in to the DCS SITREP. Don't forget to support the channel with a like, a comment, and if you haven't already subscribed, do so for more news and information on DCS World. This has been the DCS SITREP. This is Prickly Hedgehog out. We'll see you next time.